Your husband divorced you by text message. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old babe. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. I calmly replied, good luck. By the time he realized what he'd done, it was too late. The message arrived between helping customers at my boutique. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha. My hands didn't tremble as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I helped Mrs. Peterson choose a scarf. The only sign that my husband of 12 years had just destroyed our marriage via text message was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper, before typing my reply. Good luck. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old. I just received history's coldest goodbye. But while Mark was likely gloating over his grand exit, picturing me weeping over his betrayal, I calmly closed my boutique for the day. The signs had been there for months. The late nights at work that never corresponded with overtime deposits in his paycheck. The sudden password changes on his phone. The way he'd started religiously going to the gym, buying new clothes, trying to recapture his youth. 3 months ago, I'd found the receipt for a dinner for two at an expensive restaurant, on a night he'd claimed to be working late. That same night, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. A week later, when he mentioned wanting to combine our accounts to simplify things, I cheerfully agreed, while simultaneously transferring my personal savings to the new account. The joint account he just emptied contained exactly enough to keep him from getting suspicious, roughly the equivalent of 2 months' regular deposits. The rest was safely tucked away, along with detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother calling. Melissa and I are leaving tomorrow. I'll send someone for my things later. Melissa, the new receptionist at his office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party. I'd watched her laugh a little too loud at Mark's jokes. Noticed the way she touched his arm when she thought no one was looking. Young enough to be his daughter. Naive enough to think she was special. I didn't reply to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago when I found the hotel charges on our credit card statement. It's time, I said simply. He just made his move. The papers are ready, she replied. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want him served in Miami? No rush. Let him think he's gotten away with it for now. Another text from Mark. I know this must be hard for you. After all, you're not getting any younger. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The successful boutique I built from the ground up. The one that generated more income than his supposed high-powered mid-level lawsuit job. The one I'd carefully kept separate from our joint finances. I smiled, picturing the certified letters that would greet him in Miami. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. I spent that afternoon at our house, my house, since I'd inherited it from my grandmother, and kept it in my name despite Mark's repeated suggestions that I add him to the deed. Another fortunate instinct that paid off. While organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Mark looked so different back then, before his midlife crisis turned him into a caricature of his former self. These days, he wore t-shirts too tight for his expanding midsection, tried too hard to connect with the 20-somethings at his office, and used slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a 45-year-old man. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him, each one more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone your own age. I told my family already. They agree we've grown apart. It's no one's fault, really. I took a screenshot of each message and added them to my growing file of evidence. Let him keep digging his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation. His cheerful announcement about emptying our account. The last message caught my eye. By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. Haha. Perfect. I called the credit card company. This is Mrs. Harrison. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, booked earlier today. Hotel charges at the Royal Palm. And I'll need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Text messages from my husband admitting, He used our joint card to book a trip with his girlfriend. After emptying our bank account, I'll be happy to forward them. The representative's professional tone couldn't hide her satisfaction as she reversed the charges. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport tomorrow to discover their tickets had been invalidated. Their hotel reservation canceled. My phone rang again. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud at that one. He truly believed he had a claim to my grandmother's house. His ego had inflated so much he'd forgotten who actually owned the deed. Another buzz. And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a deal to pay you out your half. My half. Of my business. The one I'd solely built, financed, and grown. While he complained about my long hours and called it my hobby. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good one I'd been saving for a special occasion. This certainly qualified. Tomorrow Mark would learn some hard truths about property law and separate assets. But tonight, I would enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. The morning brought a flurry of increasingly frantic text messages from Mark. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't accept our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I turned off my phone and headed to my boutique. Fridays were always our busiest day. And I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon his mother called. Claire dear, Mark told me everything. About how controlling you've been. How you pushed him away. He says you're being vindictive now, causing trouble with his travel plans. I put her on speakerphone while I arranged a window display. He mentioned emptying our joint account? And charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit card. Silence. Then, well, he said you didn't leave him any other choice. That you'd been cold and distant. Barbara, I have his messages. Do you want me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about stealing our money? Or maybe the one where he mocked my age? Another pause. It did seem a bit cruel. And the text message breakup was appropriate? I appreciate the call, Barbara. You've always been kind to me, but I think it's best we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family before the proceedings. Goodbye, Barbara. By late afternoon, Mark's sister Amanda was spreading family gossip via mutual friends. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport. Their Miami dreams temporarily dashed. He tried using his personal credit cards, but they were maxed out. Another red flag I'd noticed months ago. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet. But he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some choice comments about you. I smiled, thinking of my own documentation. A year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, text messages proving premeditation. Mark had been so focused on his grand escape, he'd never considered I might be watching, waiting, preparing. My phone buzzed with another text. You think you're so smart. But I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half of that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Mark's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate property and business ownership. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. Monday's emergency hearing was everything I could have hoped for. Mark showed up in his new youthful attire. Designer jeans too tight for his age. A jacket that screamed midlife crisis. Melissa waited outside. Her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Mark's cheerful text about emptying our account. His credit card fraud. His documented history of hidden spending. Each piece carefully compiled during months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily hired lawyer began. My client admits he made some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive and calculated. Calculated? My lawyer countered. You mean prudent? My client protected her separate assets and kept detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive. That's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation. The prenuptial agreement separating the house, the boutique, and corporate filings solely in my name. The careful separation of personal and business finances Mark had always complained about. Mr. Harrison, the judge addressed Mark directly. You admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to end things. By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you claim ownership rights to property that, according to this documentation, is clearly separate from marital assets? The business grew during our marriage. Mark's lawyer tried again. My client is entitled to, the business was established before the marriage, my lawyer interrupted. And Mrs. Harrison maintained a strict separation of personal and business finances throughout. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned. I watched Mark's face as reality began to sink in. He thought it would be so easy. Empty our accounts, run off with his girlfriend, maybe keep half of my business in the divorce. He never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping things separate. Scoffed at my meticulous bookkeeping, calling it obsessive. The judge announced, the court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct. All joint assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return the funds removed from the joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone. Mark protested. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Harrison, the court does not look favorably upon the use of shared credit cards to fund trysts with paramours. Court dismissed. I heard Melissa asking Mark about their Miami plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. Heading back to the business he'd never understood, nor respected. In the weeks that followed, Mark made a series of increasingly desperate moves. He tried to claim the boutique had been his idea. Recalled investing money in its early days. Even hinted that he'd been my business partner all along. Claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer observed. His girlfriend's social media shows they're staying at her studio apartment. Apparently, living on a receptionist's salary isn't the glamorous getaway he envisioned. Mark's family began reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no idea, his sister Amanda admitted. He told us you were cold and controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time in tears. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. Or so I thought I had. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago. But now they felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. The boutique thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show their support, often leaving with far more than they'd planned to buy. My ex tried something similar. One customer confessed while purchasing a designer handbag. Thought he'd get everything in the divorce. Men like that, they never expect us to be smarter. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Mark. His tone swung between anger and manipulation. You ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we just work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded every message to my lawyer, unanswered. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I learned Melissa was reconsidering her position. Apparently, sharing her studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford the luxury of his own place wasn't the romantic adventure she'd envisioned. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetups felt different in the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and learning from her mistakes. Yesterday, my lawyer mentioned it during an update call. She removed her relationship status this morning. I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered his casual cruelty about my age. The way he'd assumed I'd be on the defensive without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else. Pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Mark's imagined triumph. His swaggering bravado was gone. replaced with barely concealed panic. Melissa was noticeably absent. According to office gossip, she'd moved on to a coworker her own age. Mark showed up in his old clothes. Apparently, the designer wardrobe had gone back to help pay off the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my documented asset separation. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer made one last attempt. Despite the prenuptial agreement, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support and moral support, my lawyer interrupted. Like these text messages disparaging Mrs. Harrison's business as a little shop, or these social media posts referring to it as her hobby. The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, my business, and my personal assets. Mark kept his personal belongings and his car, the value of which was less than what he owed me. You destroyed me, he muttered as we left the courthouse. I'll have to move back in with my parents. No, Mark. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure no one else got burned in the process. The man who'd mocked my age now lived in his childhood bedroom, while I continued to run my successful business. You planned this all along, he accused. You knew this would happen. No. I just paid attention. Unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records. His mother stepped between us. Enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough. As they walked away, I could hear her berating him. Honestly, what were you thinking? A 20-year-old? Emptying your bank accounts? Sending those horrible text messages? I watched them disappear into the parking lot and felt relief. Mark had thought he was writing the ending of our story with that cruel text message. Instead, he'd simply set my carefully crafted plans in motion. My phone buzzed, but this time not with texts from Mark, with notifications of new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving on, but not in the direction he'd envisioned. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mark struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he'd dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that was gaining national traction. News of Mark's situation trickled through via mutual acquaintances. He'd tried dating apps, but found women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women who knew his story via office gossip steered clear. Apparently, Melissa had warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate texts. His company's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The promotion he'd been expecting went to someone else, someone without a history of inappropriate relationships with reception staff. He tried to claim age discrimination, Amanda told me during an unexpected visit to the boutique, said they were punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my shop, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Mark had alienated his own family. I know we didn't support you at first, she admitted, fingering a silk scarf. He played the victim so well, but seeing how he's handled everything, how he's acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Mark's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. All motions were denied. His accusations of unfair distribution were dismissed based on the evidence of his own actions. He actually tried to argue his text about emptying the account was just a joke, she told me, laughing. The judge asked him if that made the theft any less illegal. The boutique's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who'd protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice on keeping personal and business finances separate. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me of Melissa. And always trust your instincts. Mark's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He'd tried online gambling, hoping to find a quick fix for his financial woes. Gotten involved in a pyramid scheme that promised quick riches. Each attempt to recapture his former lifestyle only sunk him deeper into trouble. I don't know where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one call. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet, if he took responsibility for his actions. But he still blames everyone else. You, Melissa, his company, the judge. I listened politely, but kept my distance. Their family drama was no longer my problem. My life had moved on, filled with plans for a third boutique location and a possible expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Mark's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office. His final text message before I blocked his number. Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age. Beneath it, my latest business award. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. A year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage, but about a successful entrepreneur expanding her brand. Mark's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story. During the event, Melissa walked in unexpectedly. She looked younger than ever. Or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted awkwardly, clutching her purse like a shield. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. I believed everything he told me. About how cold and controlling you were. About how you didn't support his dreams. Those weren't his dreams, Melissa. They were escapes. There's a difference. I know that now. She paused, then added. He tried to move in when you froze the accounts. Thought my studio apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I understood what you meant about dreams versus escapes. I actually laughed at that. Let me guess. He had big plans but no way to fund them. Exactly. It was all going to work out. Once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency definitely went up in value. She shook her head. I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a tiny apartment. But at least we're building something real. After she left, my assistant manager whispered. Was that the girlfriend? I didn't answer. That was another woman who'd learned the same lesson I had. Speaking of lessons, I gestured toward a young couple examining our designer handbags. Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line. The boutique had become more than a business. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Mark's mother called one last time. Not to talk about Mark, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, she said, about enabling bad behavior and making excuses for cruelty. Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems. But we don't defend him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans to open a fourth location. Mark had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model, to take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to be even stronger, even more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Mark filed another motion to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately. Ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd like that. I smiled, picturing him in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. 2 years after Mark's cruel text message, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal, but how to build and protect a successful business. My story had gone from a cautionary tale to an inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman asked, "Is it really better to keep personal and business finances separate? My husband says I'm being paranoid. That marriage is about sharing everything." My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied, until he tried to take half of my business in our divorce. Trust your instincts. My boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each one more successful than the last. The little shop Mark had scoffed at now employed 30 people, and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I learned Mark had finally moved out of his parents' house, into a small apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a lower-paying job after his old firm downsized and eliminated his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though his profile picture was clearly outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original location. She'd earned her MBA and launched her own social media consulting firm. "You inspired me," she told me once, gesturing around my shop. "Showed me how a woman can build something lasting, instead of falling for empty promises." I kept Mark's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Beneath it, a new sign: "Success is the best revenge." At my original boutique's 5-year anniversary celebration, I stood to address my employees and loyal customers. The space had evolved from a small, single shop to the flagship store of a thriving business empire. Mark's mother attended, even though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd dispersed to approach me. "I saw Mark the other day," she said, smoothing the designer dress she'd purchased from my store. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it all away." I thought about that text message. It's casual cruelty. His assumption that I would crumble without him. How he'd expected me to beg, to collapse, to prove him right in my despair. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Each new store was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young sales associate I'd hired last month, who, coincidentally, was also named Melissa, approached me with a question about the new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught my reflection in the shop's glass display case. I saw what Mark hadn't been able to see 5 years ago. Not a woman getting older, but a woman getting wiser, stronger, and more successful. His cruel text message was meant to be an ending, but it was actually a beginning. Not just for me, but for all the women who heard my story and realized they deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.